The stage is set for the Women's Hockey East Championship, and we've hit the final week of the men's regular season with a lot of possible movement, including UNH, a chance at a 5 seed, all that and more this week in Hockey East. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Hockey East alongside Eric Gallanty. I'm Tyler Murray, and yeah, we are here, the final stages of what's been a phenomenal 40th season for Hockey East and a great women's championship. The stage is set. I mean, this is the matchup I've been hoping for all year, Eric. Please break it down for us.
Yeah, I guess we shouldn't be surprised, right? And I think the thing that we shouldn't be surprised at most is that both finals were 1-1 late in the third period, because that's been the story of the whole season. On the women's side, it's Northeastern going to UConn. Northeastern will try for a unprecedented 7th consecutive title, but they'll have to do it in a different building than Matthews Arena for the first time since 2017. I think that, the thing that stands out, we just talked about it, right? That UConn game, they have to go to overtime to beat Boston College. Northeastern is 1-1. They do add a couple of empty netters after the big power play goal. It's worth resetting and talking about the turnaround that both these teams had, because it feels like so often in college hockey, the teams that are great from day one are the teams that are great on day whatever we're at right now in March. But remember, Northeastern was 8-8 overall. They were 4-6 in Hockey East play after losing to Vermont on November 21st. They've only lost 2 games since. We talked about it last week with UConn. The Huskies started 1-3-1 overall and 0-3 in Hockey East, including losing a couple of games to the team they just beat in the semifinals. They've only lost 1 Hockey East game since October 20th. Also, UConn has not lost a home game since that 0-3 start. They are 13-0-2 at home since starting a couple of games at home with a loss. And that may matter because, of course, this game is being played in Storrs. It was interesting because I think we pride ourselves here at This Week in Hockey East at trying to go beyond the numbers and find the thing for you that's going to make the difference in a matchup. And I just can't find it, Tyler. I mean, these teams are about as even as you could possibly have. Now, you kind of remember beat Northeastern a couple of times way back when in October, but we just told you about how these teams are very different since then. So let's look at the last time they played in early February in Boston at Matthews Arena. And frankly, it's about as even as a game could possibly be, right? 2-2 game. Northeastern eventually wins in a shootout, but 2-2. Shots 33-29, pretty even. Each team took 3 penalties. Each team killed 3 penalties. Each team won 30 faceoffs. Scoring chances were 13-12. Expected goals were 2.4 to 2.3. I mean, it's just as even a hockey game as you could possibly have. And you really wouldn't expect this final to be much different when they play at noon on Saturday on ESPNU. One thing to look for, and again, it's so hard to differentiate, but Jada Habish has been so important for UConn and what she's done this year. She has 3 goals and an assist in her last 4. So it's important for UConn to get her going on offense. Since January 19th, she's averaged 4.8 shots per game. She has at least 3 shots in 13 of 14 games, except against Northeastern, when the Huskies held Habish to just 1 shot. So can she get going against this Northeastern defense? That is one thing to certainly watch for. But I think this is just going to be an outstanding matchup, an outstanding hockey game, and we'll see who takes home a Hockey East championship.
And maybe the biggest stage yet for Toscano Family Ice Forum. Really excited to see the atmosphere there and a huge hockey game. Can't wait to enjoy that one. All right, Eric, then we got men's hockey, Maine at UMass. What an incredible way to finish off the season. Friday and Saturday in Orono, 7 o'clock both games, both on ESPN+. Right now, it's 3-seed Maine against 4-seed UMass, but that could easily change. Just 2 points separate the teams. And in the pairwise, you've got UMass at 11 and Maine at 9. Ben Barr, he's led Maine to 20 wins for the first time since 2012, and they've already secured a first-round bye. But can they finish strong and lock down a home quarterfinal game? You can only imagine what the atmosphere would be like up at the Alphon. UMass has clinched a bye as well, and they can pass Maine for the 3 seed with a big weekend as long as they stay at least tied with Providence. Ryan Ufko is the man of the hour in Amherst, Hockey East Player of the Week, overtime winners on back-to-back nights against the arch-rival UMass Lowell Riverhawks. He's now second in Hockey East in goal scoring by a defenseman behind Lane Hudson. The third-place guy is Ufko's teammate Scott Morrow. Now, Morrow's been a great story over his 3 years of development, how he's rounded out his defensive game, especially becoming a more complete player. But Ryan Ufko, as a junior captain, especially in a year where UMass really needed some leadership to bounce back from a tough season, Ufko's meant as much to this program as anybody, and it's nice to see him getting that kind of attention on a national stage because of those 2 game-winning goals. But ask anybody around the Mullen Center, Ryan Ufko, he really is UMass hockey, and just good for him to get that kind of moment to put the team on his back in a couple of different games. Now, Maine, this is they went into Amherst and beat UMass 1-0 a month ago, so a rematch of that great game. It was 76 seconds in that Brandon Chabrier scored, and that was it. UMass had some grade A chances, but Maine was strong on the penalty kill. Albin Boya had a 15-save shutout kind of early in the rotation they've had now with Boya and Osman. So that's one of their best road wins of the season. It's up there with that overtime win at Quinnipiac, which also had a game winner from Brandon Chabrier. That was an overtime, of course. But this is one of the best home teams in the country, the Maine Black Bears. They entered February without a home loss all season until an overtime defeat against Providence. And then Northeastern, that's still their only home regulation loss of the year. That was a 4-0 win for the Huskies 2 weeks ago. So not impossible, I guess, to win at the Alphon, but this is exactly where Maine wants to be. Keep an eye on the Nadeau brothers, as we always do, but in a bit of a different prism this weekend. Bradley and Josh Nadeau are on 3-game point droughts, both of them, and that is the longest of the season for either guy. It feels like they're due for a big breakout. They don't stay off the score sheet very long, so I'm very interested to see how Greg Carville is going to strategize against them defensively and see how those great offensive blue liners we've talked about, Scott Moore and Ryan Ufko, handle the challenge of trying to lock down the Nadeau brothers, which very few teams have been able to do this year. So UMass and Maine, Ben Barr against Greg Carville with a lot on the line. Can't wait for that one.
Yeah, another big matchup. And this one doesn't quite have the implications in terms of seeding because BU is already locked into the number 2 seed as they play their final weekend of the season because BC has clinched the 1. But BU going to Providence on Thursday night after their bye week last week, it's kind of really subtle. But BU has made some changes here that maybe is pushing them back into where they want to be in the Frozen Four and beyond and where they have a chance to go this year. And this is a great example of teams adjust. And we don't always notice it from the outside, but it's really important. And you look at what they've done with Jack Harvey. He moved up on February 2nd with Macklin Celebrini on the same line against UNH. He has 3 goals and 5 assists since that point. Then Shane LaChance got put on that line as well on February 17th against Providence. And in 3 games that those 3 have played together, creating their own freshman line for BU, LaChance now has 2 goals and 2 assists and shown off a little balance for this BU team. They've scored 17 goals in their last 3 games, 1 of which against Providence and then 2 against UConn. And another guy worth noting in that stretch is Jeremy Wilmer, who has 2 goals and 6 assists in his last 3 games, including 4 on Saturday, the 24th against UConn. Now for Providence, I think last weekend, Tyler, we saw everything we love and everything we're just looking for more from Providence because Thursday they had a really good win, 4-2 over Merrimack. They controlled the game. Bennett Shimmick had a big power play goal. And then in the game up at Lawler, they lose 2-1 despite outshooting Merrimack 47-16 in that game. It's the 4th time this year that Providence has lost a game when they outshot their opponent by more than 15. Now, they've won plenty of those games. They do it a lot, but it is worth noting that. So you do see this game sometimes with Providence. You know, they're 3-4-1. If you go back to February 2nd, they've scored 4 twice in that span. In the other 6 games, they've scored 2 or less. Now, we've seen Providence not be able to score a ton and still get to a hockey semifinal. They did it last year, right? With back-to-back 2-1 overtime wins. But where is this offense? I'm really interested to see what we see from this offense this weekend against BU. These 2 teams split their series earlier this year with BU kind of controlling the second game after Providence won in the shootout in game 1. And this is important for Providence to try to solidify their spot, looking for the number 4 seed. They're in a mix with UMass. We'll talk more about the seeding later on in our show. They're in pretty good shape for the NCAA tournament, but this would really solidify it, getting a big game against BU at home. So big one for Providence as they take on BU on Thursday, the first of 2 games against different opponents this weekend for both of these teams.
Yeah, speaking of that national tournament, that's an interesting matchup for a team like BU against a team like Providence, that big, physical, well-structured team that also has some high-end scoring talent. You're going to face a lot of those kind of teams when you get to the round of 16. So always interesting to project what that might look like. And we've also got a likely playoff preview, maybe the most likely playoff preview out of any of the matchups we'll see this weekend. I'm talking about UNH against UMass Lowell, both games on Nesson, 7:05 Friday, and then 7:30 on Saturday for the game at UNH. Maybe it's a 6 versus 11 preview, maybe a 7 versus 10, but if that happens, you could see 3 straight Wildcat Riverhawk games in a 6-day span, including the first round playoff game on Wednesday. I have to say, Eric, there's a lot to like about Lowell lately, especially over their last 7 games. Now, people might say they've only won 1 of those 7 games, but let's take a closer look. 4 of those games went to overtime. One of them was a 2-1 loss against Providence that was tied after 2 periods. And the one final score that maybe doesn't look great was 4-0 at Northeastern. Well, they had just upset the Huskies the night before, and in the rematch, that was a 0-0 game until the final 3 minutes of the second period. They had a 42-save shutout from Cam Whitehead. He was spectacular. They outshoot Northeastern by 14. And then last Saturday at UMass, Jack Varwerk, the freshman, he scored 2 goals in a span of 65 seconds. He's been primed for a breakout all year. Norm Bazin says we love his game. He's cerebral. He knows where to be. Only a matter of time until the goals start coming. And the breakout happened at the Mullen Center on Saturday. So watch out for that freshman forward, Jack Varwerk, from here on out. Now, UNH, they don't come away with any points in the standings against BC last weekend. But if I'm a UNH fan, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about any of this. I don't think I've ever been more impressed by a weekend that yielded 0 points all year. I mean, they're tied with BC 3-3 on Friday, 4 minutes left in the game. Then they're doubling up BC in shots in the first period on Saturday. And of course, that's a 0-0 game with 7 minutes left until a great effort from Eamon Powell on the give and go with Ryan Leonard to break the deadlock and ultimately win the game. What stands out to me is where the goals came from on Friday from UNH. Second line winger Kristaps Skrastins, then defensemen Colton Heward and Nikolai Jensen. None of those guys had more than 5 goals for the year entering that Friday night game. UNH, as we know, has a terrific top line, Ryan Conmey, Cy Leclerc, and Liam Devlin. But if they can find a way to get scoring outside of those 3 guys, they're really as dangerous as anybody in the Hockey East tournament. So I think that's a really positive development for them as they try to find their way to big-time goal scoring, maybe some gritty goal scoring, shot from the blue line, bodies in front. They were doing a whole lot of that against BC on Sunday, just didn't get the bounces they needed to knock off the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is the power play, Tyler, because it feels impossible right now that UNH is on a power play drought. I think it's over their last 13 or 14 over this stretch, but it's not for lack of chances. It hasn't been for lack of chances all year. And Cy Leclerc is doing a really good job continuing to win faceoffs and giving his team chances. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And now, how are these pieces all going to fit together and form a Hockey East tournament field? It's time to take a look at that in our short shifts, brought to you by the Shift Group, helping elite athletes and veterans become elite sales professionals. Let's start with the opening round, and then we'll move up a little bit. There's still kind of a logjam between 7, 8, and 9 in a potential Hockey East standings. Northeastern's the 7 right now. They can't finish lower than 8th, so they'll have at least a home game. They're only 1 point behind UNH, though UNH and Vermont below them do have a game in hand. So Northeastern with just 1 game against Providence. But the one that's interesting to look at is Vermont going down to UConn. 1 of 2 games this weekend for Vermont, the only one for UConn. They both come in 3 games back of Northeastern and a tie for 8th right now. Vermont, actually, with some crazy results, can actually get as high as 6th potentially in the standings. But UVM going to UConn on Thursday night. If Vermont goes in and wins, they guarantee themselves a home game and they force UConn to the 9 seed. If UConn wins, they jump to the 8. Vermont drops down to the 9. Now, it's not a direct kind of win and get the 8 seed for UConn because there is a potential if Vermont were to then turn around and beat BU and Northeastern were not to get any points, a 3-way tie for the 7 spot. UConn would lose that. They would drop to the 9. But simplest way to put it, that may be determining who the 8 seed is and who's getting a home game between UConn and Vermont. UConn, who obviously had a tough weekend a couple of weeks ago against BU, But then all of a sudden, it felt like all year, it's only a matter of time, right? Matthew Wood kind of breaks out a little bit. The UConn offense kind of breaks out a little bit. And they have the potential to be a scary team in that opening round. So Northeastern right now is in the driver's seat for the 7. UConn and Vermont will play to maybe decide the 8-9 with a couple of other tiebreakers potentially out there.
And home ice just so big. Maybe you hear from some detractors about single elimination. Oh, does it devalue the regular season? There's so much to play for. The first round bye and the home playoff game in the first round. And how about the 4 seed that could see 3 different teams tied for by the end of the weekend? Of course, a top 4 seed gets you a home quarterfinal game and a bye out of the first round. If you get a 5 seed, you're the road team in a quarterfinal game, so you still get a bye. So the 3 teams that could wind up tied for 4th, I don't want to say it's unlikely, but let's break it down. UNH, UMass, and Providence. It would take UNH with 2 regulation wins against UMass Lowell, and then UMass and Providence would have to go pointless with 2 regulation losses. Of course, UMass going up to Maine, and then Providence, they've got Northeastern and BU, so certainly a tough weekend for them. I think the simplest way to lay it out is what's the path for UNH to get to that 5 seed, even though they can only tie UMass and Providence, and they don't have the head-to-head tiebreaker against either team. Well, in Hockey East, if it's a 3-way tie, a head-to-head kind of gets all jumbled, right? So they go regulation win percentage in conference games. So anything in overtime, anything in a shootout, take it out of the equation. Right now, UMass is 8-6 in conference regulation games. Providence is 8-7. And UNH is 9-11. So you're thinking, okay, well, why does UNH win that? Well, of course, we're talking about the scenario where they go 2-0 in regulation, and the other 2 teams go 0-2. If Providence goes 0-2, they're below 500 in regulation, so they lose that tiebreaker. The Friars would drop to 6th. UNH and UMass then, they get to go to the head-to-head tiebreaker. UMass has the advantage there. So if those 3 teams tie, it would be UMass with the 4 seed, UNH with the 5, and Providence with the 6. So certainly more than just seeding, or it's not as easy as you might think just looking at the standings here, but every single point counts, including, you're going to play maybe a little extra hard for a regulation win instead of going to overtime. And of course, this conversation all has us really excited for Hockey's championship weekend. And they always go fast, but tickets, it sounds like, especially going fast this year. So make sure you get in early so you can grab those preferred seats before it's too late. And I can only imagine it's going to be even harder to get tickets by the time those matchups really start to crystallize. Will we see BU-BC? Will you get a BU Northeastern Beanpot rematch at the Garden? So much intrigue, so much exciting stuff. But hop on those Hockey East tickets as soon as you can for championship weekend at TD Garden. All right, Eric, that's all for us this week. We are winding things down, a bittersweet time of year, but it should be a phenomenal finish to the women's tournament, the men's regular season, and into the men's playoff run. We'll break it all down for you next week on This Week in Hockey.